The Branding Your Business podcast is for small business owners looking to build a customer favorite brand and a value-driven business. From solo shows covering marketing tactics to experts sharing their brand stories, each episode delivers actionable insights for entrepreneurs who want to impact the world. We're sharing how strategic moves and authentic connections can build a profitable business minus the burnout. Tune into the Branding Your Business podcast with me, Praise Santos McKenna of Come Plum, to design a brand your audience adores while building a life you love. I not only get to nerd out about brands here on the Branding Your Business podcast, but I get to have conversations with folks on their podcasts too. A special conversation I had was with Kristin Sweeting of the Dangerous Creatives podcast. Kristin is incredible. A wealth of wisdom, has taught me 100% of what I know, or it feels like it. And she was so gracious to have me on the podcast so we could talk about brand values, brand foundations, and a really exciting thing we chatted about was brand evolution. You and I aren't static people. I'm not the same person I was a year ago, 5 years ago. Same with our brands. They are constantly changing too. So go ahead, take a listen. I hope you gain new wisdom and new insight to lead courageous brands. Lead a brand that is constantly evolving, just like you are. Well, hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode. Today we have such a treat because Praise McKenna, who is a brand coach, brand photographer. She is here to teach us a little bit about branding and how to have a more significant impact with our business through our brand. So we're so excited to have you, Praise. Can you tell us a little bit more about you, where you're based, and the kind of work that you do?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Big fan of Kristin, obviously, big fan of the Dangerous Creative podcast. So it's really fun to be here today. A little bit about me. I'm based in San Francisco, California, foggy slash sunny slash cold slash hot San Francisco, California. We have a branding studio here, and we love working with clients to create memorable brands. We love working with small business owners, coaches, creatives to help them not only just think through their business, but how can create experiences that really latch in people's memories. So that is a fun thing that we get to do, but I don't feel like it came around in a really succinct way that I evolved into this kind of person, into this kind of business. I feel as if a lot of other creatives can relate. Like you just kind of take one step at a time, figure out what brings you a lot of joy, what brings a lot of energy. And that's how I kind of fell into it. I started doing photography when I was 16, and I was a really big fan of loving people well and making pretty things, but I didn't think it could turn into a business until someone asked me to take photos for them. And I just kept on saying yes as people asked me, and I kept on being reactive to it. And after a while, I stood back and thought, wait a minute. But there are some jobs that I do and I leave really tired. There's some jobs I do and I leave like super excited. So how can I stay in this super excited zone? And that's kind of when I honed in more with female entrepreneurs, small business owners, and really helping them gain confidence and inspiration and resourcing them, not only with photos, but also with, hey, how do you make this thing that you really love? And so that's how Come Plum came to be what it is today.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah, I love like what is really lighting us up and how do we lean more into that? And I think it's easy to get kind of caught up not in that place. And so that's amazing to hear. Well, I'm excited to talk about branding because I think that this is something that comes up a lot, but we talk about it and don't always fully understand what a brand is or why a business even needs a brand, or like are people brands? Like are we a brand walking around? Like tell us a little bit more about branding and why it's important.
You know, I feel as if the word brand is a lot like the word love, in that the English language is very poor in the sense that we need more words for it. The same way, like love, I can love my dog and I love my sister and I love trees and my husband, but all in different ways. People are using the word brand to define a company or a visual identity or an experience. And it's kind of a yes and right now. An analogy that really helped me, and a quote that I like to share, is that a business is often like the skeleton, but a brand is the soul. So you can't really have one without the other, or if you have one without the other, then it's kind of useless. So we all have a brand, but now we have to put intention and cultivating it So in simpler terms, a brand is what people think, feel, and say about you and your business. And so when we make it simply that, that's now something we can really work with.
What people think, feel, and say about you and your business, right? I love that. I love
Mhm.
thinking of it like the soul. And I think also your brand goes ahead of you. It's like what people say when you're not in the room. It's how people feel when you are in the room. Like a lot of times we're not super aware of the brand that we're putting out either. Um, do you have some favorite brands that when you think of like this, they've done this really well, or I really love what this brand stands for? What are some of your favorites?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And this is a good question. And for those listening into the podcast to really think, where are the brands that you keep on returning to? And you don't have to do a ton of research. You don't have to think about it. And somehow when you need that thing, they're always like top of mind. And a good contrast is that okay, we know that Target for some reason is really irresistible. But why is it that we love going to Target? But somehow when I think about going to another like supermarket or general store, sometimes I'm like, oh, that just feels like work. But yet their business is the same. They're selling us home goods, right? But yet we want to go to Target. Now, what is that extra special sauce that makes it happen? It's because they've cultivated a full experience for us. So that's like a good thing for us to understand. Oh, that's the power of a brand. Some brands that I really admire and I feel like are doing things well. I really like the brand Everlane. Another San Francisco brand started here, now is global, but they are really great at honing in on their values and showcasing to the world what they value, their values are. One of their main things is transparency. So, you know, exactly like this t shirt I know is made in Vietnam. I can look up the factory and even on their website to show that transparency is such a value. They'll show you here's the price breakdown. This is how much the cotton costs. This is how much the labor costs. This is how much the shipping costs. And now this is how much we're charging you. And you're like, okay, wow. Like, even though it is a $30 t-shirt and I could buy a $30 t-shirt somewhere else, that whole experience of them living out their values makes me very loyal to their brand. And so, as people are listening, I feel like it's a good thing to know the brands that we admire and the brands that we keep on coming back to. Like, why is Apple such a lovable brand? Why is Disney such a lovable brand? And then you kind of reverse engineer and try to think what made them so lovable? Why do I keep on coming back there? And I'm hoping even in this short podcast, we can give people tangible ways to make their business, their brand, even their personal brand, which we can chat about a little bit, kind of that go to for people when they think about that thing that you specialize in.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's such a good example with Everlane of they're really clear that those are their values and they have them in different places so that the people that align with their values are attracted to them and all of that. And Disney, I feel like I've learned so much about client experience from Disney too, because it's just like, oh, they've thought through all those little details of how to make the experience better for their people. And I just think that that's so cool to build that into your brand too.
Which kind of a funny thing. I was thinking about Disney the other day because we're like wanting to watch things on Disney Plus, but I grew up in Orlando, Florida, where Disney World is headquartered. And for some reason, like this memory, this core memory came to mind to use inside out Pixar terms of I remember I was 8 years old and coming off like the tram to go into Magic Kingdom. I was so excited, had my ticket in hand, and somehow from the tram to the ticket counter, the ticket was gone, like was not in my hand anymore. And I was one, so afraid to tell my parents. And then two, I just was overwhelmed with emotions. We've been looking forward to going there. And so I just started crying like outside the gate. I just started weeping. And my parents are also kind of confused. And like through tears, I explained to them that I'd lost my ticket. But within minutes, a manager had come up to us, asked us what was wrong, and gave me a new ticket, like $100, $150 ticket, because Disney World is really good at being the happiest place on earth. And so if they see one of their target audience, this 8-year-old girl crying, they do everything they can do to like help change that experience from traumatic into something really happy. And look, 20 years later, well, 24, let's be real about how old I am. Um, they have just like imprinted such a memory in me. And so they are a great brand to look up to.
That's amazing. I love that.
Okay, so if we have a business, if we have a brand, first of all, what doesn't count, what counts and what doesn't count as branding? And then how can we build that kind of lovable brand? How can we kind of start thinking about what sets us apart, what makes us different, all of those things so that we stand out? Because I know everyone's like, oh my gosh, there's so many photographers, there's so many creatives, there's so many coaches. How do we start using these branding techniques to stand out, to be a little different?
Totally. Yeah, that is a great question. And now we're going to just like have a little fun with it so that we can use our time together to get people's wheels turning. One big thing is for people to lean into their values, lean into the things that are really important to them. We teach a more in-depth values workshop, but we're going to do just kind of a quick one here, and then kind of showcase my values and your values, and then turn those into making memorable brands together. So values are kind of the how we do things and also how we don't do things, right? And so Kristin and I are similar in that we do the act of photography or we do the act of coaching, but how we do it, even though I'm very much influenced by Kristin and so grateful for her mentorship, we're going to do it a little differently. We're going to do it in different ways to really it be like the experience with praise and the experience with Kristin. And so let's talk through our values and like let's talk about how those are expressed. So Kristin, when you have Kristin Sweeting and you have Dangerous Creatives, what are some values of those brands that you have?
Yeah, I think both brands have growth. We really value like kind of being the best version of yourself or always kind of growing. Not that we're ever going to reach some perfect moment, but just that we want to be growing and learning more about ourselves. Hospitality and celebration is big. Like, let's celebrate the good things in our lives and help other people celebrate those in themselves as well. And then like freedom and liberation is a big one too. And that's kind of like bravery and making courageous choices that set yourself up to have more time freedom and more relationship freedom and break out of boxes that maybe like society has put us in. So I feel like those are some of the main ones is growth, freedom and liberation, and hospitality.
Even just hearing you say that, I'm just like, I want to snap with you. Like those will really light people up. And just as like a tactful communication way, we don't have to be so overt about our values anytime we interact with anyone. Like you could say it on a sales call if you want to. You could have it on a t-shirt. I do encourage everyone to have it on their website because I think especially millennials and Gen Z actually very much rely on an about us page and want to make our values aligned. So that's like a little aside. But how can we cultivate that experience of those feelings? Like you want people to be free. You want people to be courageous anytime they interact with your brand. So now we just have to, if that's our end feeling, if that's where we know where our brand destination is for our customers of what we want them to experience, now we just kind of go backwards and we can even use our own examples of, oh, what were experiences in my own life that helped me overcome a fear? Or what were experiences in my own life that helped me taste a little freedom? And what we're doing, the service we're providing for our clients is kind of making it quicker and easier for them to get to that place that might have taken us years to get to, might have taken us a while for us to realize those values were even ours or that those values were even important to us. And I will say, as a person who's experienced the brands that Kristin has created, I can testify that she has created such interesting spaces and framework for us to experience those things. Even you naming your podcast, um, naming your mastermind and anything you do through coaching. It's called Dangerous Creatives. And I imagine that those words were not chosen flippantly. Can you tell us a little bit about even the name and how those reflect your values?
Yeah. The danger name came out of a season of transformation in my own life where it was like I felt like a lot of the my background was very religious. It was very kind of squelched in a lot of ways, and not just like normal religion, like kind of abusive religion. And so I was kind of this quiet, mousy, sweet, like expected to only ever be a parent and never do anything else. So there was this early phase of my life that I probably didn't transition out of until my late 20s. And as I was transitioning out of that, I made a lot of scary moves. I left a marriage, I left a religion, I left a part of town, I left a house. Like I had all these kind of uprooting moments. And the people around me would often comment on it. And so actually it was on a study abroad trip. One of the people that had known me for a long time that was attending, she was like, you're not Kristin Sweeting anymore. You're Kristin Danger. You're just out here doing things you love. You're out here like making these scary moves. Like you're not sweet. You're like kind of dangerous. And I was like, yeah. And so for the rest of the trip, they called me Kristin Danger. And it kind of like played into why our course is called Danger School. And it's kind of a play on that, like, when it feels dangerous to put ourselves out there, it feels dangerous to go against what society says. And it like kind of is. And that's what's cool about it. Like you have to let go of this old version of you to become this new version. And yeah, that's dangerous,
Ooh, thank you so much, Kristin, for letting me just like hear your origin story right now to get that. But what's so good about that too, and this is another good example, is that even sometimes your audience can give you feedback of the feelings you're already exuding. And so sometimes you just have to be like, oh, I can both cultivate the feeling I want my people to experience and also just ask our audience, like, what feelings are, like, what vibes are coming across? And then that's the brand that you are already creating and you're putting out there too. And so there's a lot of interesting lessons here in just your story, right? Like, you know where you want to take your audience. You chose a name that in a way your audience like brought out to you, but I see you continually living out, even as being a recipient of your coaching of, ooh, Kristin, things that Kristin has told me of like praise. Maybe you're getting in your own way of your own success. Like, what if you are your own roadblock? And that's spicy, dangerous stuff, but it's also so consistent with your brand is that you're asking your people, creatives like us, to take like some risks, do things that are outside the comfort zone, go into the danger zone, because that's actually where we might find our sweet spot too. So for those listening, how can we apply this really great story from Kristin to our own feeling? There's a few ways that you can do this too in cultivating your own brand and also cultivating your own personal brand. And so let me just give an aside about those two things. So there's Kristin Sweeting, the individual, and then Kristin Sweeting Photography, the brand, Dangerous Creatives, Danger School, etc. too. I like to think about it as like the person who started it, you are going to be your number one ambassador, and you have a brand even when you don't even have a business. Because if it is really what people think, feel, and say, it's almost as if you have a reputation. I joke that my dad has a brand, and what my dad is known for is he really loves to help people. If you're ever in Orlando, Florida and need a ride, that is Henry Santos's favorite thing to do. That is his brand, right? And so for us to remember that as small business owners or solopreneurs, even when we meet somebody at a professional networking event, or we meet someone like you're just attending a wedding, people ask you what you do, that is the time for brand ambassadorship and knowing that you are representing this business that you have built as well. So you can cultivate both kind of at the same time. But what's nice about having a brand that's a little bit separate from you is as you grow your team, the people that are attracted to want to work with you will need to align with those values, and they're going to want to align with those values as well. And so for people listening, again, as you're cultivating what people think, feel, and say about you, I challenge you when you're even in a non-professional workplace, but people are asking you that really annoying question of what do you do, which side note, people should ask you more than what do you do. They should ask you better questions of like, what is bringing you peace this week? Or what is bringing joy this week? But that's an aside. But culturally here in the US, people will ask you, what do you do? I really want to for you to shift your mindset that you are representing your brand right then and there. How can you say something to already cultivate what you want people to think, feel, and say about you? You could be way more interesting. I could simply say, like, well, I'm a photographer. Or I could say, like, I help people check branding off their to-do list. Like something that's a little saucier, like a little more memorable, that really shows who my target audience is and what we do. And so that's just a little homework piece that people can do if they want to challenge themselves. Of one thing they can do to build their brand and even their personal brand is introduce yourself kind of a juicier, meatier way. But really, like the overall brand homework for those listening is, what is that end feeling that we want to go to? What is that transformation we want to bring into anyone we serve, whether it's through a product or service? And how can we reverse engineer creating experiences and interactions to help get them there?
I love that. Yeah, I love that of like, what's the thing I could say that isn't just kind of vanilla, but paints a picture for people of a little bit more of what you're doing. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about your brand, Praise.
Yeah, so my brand, again, I am hoping as a brand coach, I can fast forward what it's taken me 10 years to learn, because I was so cautious about owning up to the fact that I owned a small business. I was like kind of hesitant, like, is this really a thing? How am I doing this? How am I getting there? But it was after a while of just self-awareness and discovery of figuring out what I really love to do. Because even Kristin right now, I feel like when we first started, I was like kind of like this. But as I started teaching, like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. And I know that this is my sweet spot. I really light up about it and I really get excited about it. So for me, wanting people to be resourced, inspired, and confident is the core end of the feeling that I want people who experience Come Plum to feel. And so whether they are meeting me in person, listening to me on a podcast, or working with any one of our associate photographers, reading an email from us, or going to our website, if those three feelings are what they leave with, then I know we've done a really good job. But our values that helped us get there, we think of it in three kind of pockets. And that is, it's funny, I have it written down just so that I can say it in a more succinct way. Our values we put in three buckets. We think about whole world meaning we seek to use environmentally friendly practices. Like, I love sustainability and social impact. My professional background is in the nonprofit sector. So this is like a big heartbeat of what we do. So the whole world, thinking globally about how any decision we make here, how that has a ripple effect. But we also focus on whole people in the world. Relationally, how we interact with people, we want to work with integrity, honesty, encouragement. Even though we are big into social impact and sustainability, we don't do it in a way that points fingers. Again, we resource people, we empower people, we help them feel confident in that way. And then our last little bucket is we think out of this world. So this is a way we innovate. We never saw someone doing like a business and brand audit. We're like, we want to do that for all our people too. This is like new ways of thinking. We also want to highlight beauty. I know we've taken photos for many coaches, many service providers, but how can we do it in a new way that feels fresh for every person? And so these three values are how we do the things we do. If our service is brand, photography, and coaching, we hope that these three value buckets express themselves in that way to get them to that end feeling of feeling inspired, resourced, and confident.
I love that. I love the way that you describe it too. Of there's these buckets, and then we have an end goal, and then we have a way that we take people to that end goal. So even if someone listening is like a wedding photographer and you have this vision for how you want to help people achieve their wedding at the end, you have to have kind of the reason why, and then how to get there, and then what you're trying to achieve with them at the end. I love that.
100%.
Okay, so if someone's coming to you for brand strategy, where do you start? Like, what do we need to do to make sure that we are electric, that we've got something different? Like, what do we need to make sure we're focusing on as we are elevating our brand?
You know what's so funny? I realize I think in groups of three a lot. Like, even with talking about our values, I was talking about that and feelings are a group of three. I grew up in church and I feel like they always had 3 points at church. And I think that's just through osmosis.
Yeah.
It happened that way. And so we again think in three different buckets of brand foundation, and then we get into brand strategy, and then we get into brand expression. So I know you're asking about brand strategy, but let me first highlight that a common mistake between or amongst all small business owners is they often think, hey, if I go on Fiverr and get a logo, boom, we got a business. Like we are ready to go. Like we jump toward brand expression so fast because we want to like validate ourselves. And if you're out there and you're putting your hand up because you're guilty, you are in good company. And I'm not stopping you from doing that. I'm just asking you to kind of backtrack a little bit because it's often like we rent this really nice convertible Porsche, bright red, it's shiny, and we have it. We have no map, we have no destination, so it's just sitting there. And that's why I got into brand photography as I started working with small businesses. And the reason I got into brand coaching is that we would deliver this really beautiful gallery that they felt really comfortable and inspired and resourced while they had their photo shoot. And then I'd hand them these images and they would just sit on their computer because they didn't have a brand strategy. And they didn't have their brand foundations either. They didn't know why they even started a business. They didn't know what their values were, etc. And so let's backtrack a little bit to get to kind of this meaty middle. Is you have to start with the brand foundations. We have a freebie that I'll give a link to Kristin to put it on our show notes too. But it's just working on your mission, vision, values, and story. It's really getting to the core of why are you starting this business? Whether it's for you, like is it because you want to quit your full-time job, right? Or maybe it's you want to invest in your community or you want to save wealth for your children. Those are all really good reasons, but we need to have a core why, like why you as a person started it. And then we also need a mission for the business as well. Like, what is the thing that it does today, right? Like the thing our business does today, we do photography and coaching, right? But a vision is what do I want to impact in the world for tomorrow? We have a very audacious goal or a very audacious vision as a business. We want to impact 10,000 women. How can we do that? Right? And how can we quantify that? And so having those core things really make a difference. I already went on a spiel on my values, but it's even honing in on your story. That is knowing how to share in like bite size or longer form your story and your why. We are such relational creatures, and this is just a marketing tip. If you can tell it as a story, it will really help people remember your brand. It will really help people understand, like, oh, I want to support her. I want to support what she's doing because I know where she came from. I know where she's going, etc. And so that's what we need first is we need those brand foundations. Whereas a brand strategy is mixed a little bit with a business strategy, mixed a little bit with a marketing strategy. It's kind of the intersection of both. And so again, we're wanting to ask what is the feelings, what is the impression we want to leave with people, and how can we smartly like backtrack it a bit, and how can we combine that and have the Venn diagram with like our mission in the world to make sure those really interact well. Because for me, if I had a brand strategy like we really want to impact 10,000 women and really want them to feel inspired, resourced, and confident, I could do it in a way in where it's a nonprofit where I just go out and speak for free to people and hype them up. That could be a strategy, but I also am wanting to make a living. I also have savings goals for our families. And so I need it to make a profit as well. And so that's when we have to also think about, okay, what are experiences, offerings, services that we can provide people that people need, that meet their need, right? We have to know what our target audience needs, what they want, and how we can use our special sauce, our special branding in a way to meet that need with the demand that's on a market, but do in a way that's different. Again, I give the example of Target. They are meeting a need that people need homeware. It's like we need that kind of go-to shirt. We need that go-to pant. And there's people out there, whatever you all are providing, whether it's people need a wedding photographer, people need a coach, etc. So we know we're meeting that need, but again, your values, having a brand strategy is how you get there. And what's really fun is having people just dream really big. Like if budget wasn't an issue, if time wasn't an issue, if you didn't have to make a ton of profit from something, but just dreaming really big, how could we cultivate that really fun feeling in the world? How can create an experience to help people remember your brand? And whether you're a wedding photographer and you're putting together like the best intimate dinner for all couples who are engaged, like candlelight, freebies, like it could be anything. And I want you all to think ahead of that and then reverse engineer how can we do that in a smaller way. Maybe then you just take out one couple to dinner and make a really great brand impression on them. And that is a great way for you to then strategize like, oh, okay, let's test out how we do this. And then we can scale and do it more. Because as you get feedback, kind of how your people on study abroad are literally telling you, like, wow, you are doing something dangerous. Or maybe your people tell you and your brand words are inspired. Wow, I felt really inspired from just our small phone call. You know that your brand is starting to make an impact and it still goes aligned with your mission and vision and values. And then you just continue to experiment to make it more and more. And you can keep those customers coming back over and over. And now that you've done that, you built a brand they love, but also that you love as well. And so it's a great win-win situation.
And I think it takes some experimenting too. Like I liked the example of taking people to dinner and figuring out your brand experience because I think some people are like, ooh, I have this working, like I'm going to scale, I'm going to do this. But maybe what you really like about your business and your brand is that really personal connection. And so it's easy to kind of like, oh, I went there and maybe that wasn't quite right. And that felt not like it was aligned with my values and let's readjust. So I love that. And I know it made me think of like personal has to be one of my brand values too. Cause I'm like, I want everyone to feel like I know who they are. I know their name. I know all their stuff, like never this like big box store kind of vibe. It's always really personal and intimate and like known.
Well, this is a great like time for me to ask you a question. Was there like a big store brand or even any brand in general that made you feel like they really had a personal touch?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this with hotels because there's a big I wouldn't say they're like a huge chain, but they're a big they're like a internationally franchised luxury hotel. And so they have people coming in and out of their hotel all the time and they know your name when you walk in the door and they know it when you're walking around. You feel like they've known you your whole life. And so that's the other thing too, is like you can grow and scale as long as you hold those values really like, core and central and not kind of let them fade away as you're growing.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. When someone just uses your first name, you're like, oh, they know me. It makes a huge difference.
This hotel, it was so cute. It's the Belmond properties, which I like love. They're so fancy and beautiful. But like Hudson was with us, and so they always have like a little thing in your room when you go in, like a wine bottle and cheese plate. And they came up to Hudson when we were in the lobby and asked him how to spell his name. And they went and they made this plate with his name written out in little candies and like had a kid's snack tray for him along with the adult one, and like put it in the room and we're like, Hudson, oh my gosh, look, they like wrote your name out in candy. I mean, this was like next level. They brought him a little tiny children's robe and like he'll remember forever, we'll remember forever. It's just like those things that probably didn't take them too much time, but just made such a huge difference,
Such a huge difference. And I feel like, well, first, like, way to go with that hotel chain. Like,
Yeah.
Hudson, what a lucky guy. I think about like our people listening, a lot of them are photographers, whether they're a family photographer, a wedding photographer. An easy win could be putting on a questionnaire like, hey, like, what music are you really into right now? And maybe during the engagement session, have a playlist ready to go. Like something simple. And that actually doesn't cost you anything, but an added line on your questionnaire. And so this is so fun to teach people like, let's create experiences because sometimes you can't exactly measure how your brand is making an impact. But when people keep coming back, and I can assure you it's because your brand is making an impression on them.
Totally. And that's such a good suggestion or good idea of like, hey, you can just include something on an automated worksheet that you already have or automated questionnaire that lets you like add something back in at a later point. That could be such a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else that we should know about branding or any challenges that you find people running into or anything that are kind of like branding pitfalls or like the most important things? What are the highlights for us to consider?
Yes. So I feel like I want to write people a permission slip that your brand is going to evolve just as we humans also evolve too. And some of it is by necessity. I remember in 2021 when there was such a huge reckoning, and I pray it continues around racial justice, there were some brands that didn't respond quickly enough. And there are some brands that got canceled because they're like, hey, wake up. This is the time for you to respond and really live out your values and acknowledge it, etc. And so by necessity, brands are going to evolve. But even with you as like the visionary and CEO of your small business, you're going to evolve too. There's going to be some, not that you're going to totally shift, but there's going to be different things that are piquing your interest or come to light as one of your top values that might not have been your values before. I know for me, early on, I was like, yeah, we're going to take risks. We're going to do a lot of like kind of cool, crazy things, just try it out, be courageous. And now I'm like, actually, I want systems. I want things that are a little more in place. I want more security, etc. And so where they are on the priority list might shift a little bit too. And so allowing yourself, giving yourself permission that things might kind of change and flow, just as your audience also changes and flows. So as a brand, I really encourage you to give yourself permission to change and be really in tune with yourself and really in tune with your audience of what their needs are. How can we evolve with them too? And that can come down in a very practical way. When we talk about a marketing strategy for brands, we often encourage them to have pillars. So we think about 4 pillars help hold up a building, right? And so if you have 4 pillars when it comes to your marketing, these are the 4 things that you talk about often, and people will start associating you as a thought leader in that space. So for me, I often talk about like female entrepreneurship. I talk about photography. I talk about branding. I talk about even ethical entrepreneurship, what it is to kind of do good in the world. And those things people will read about on my Instagram, in person. I just like love talking about it. They'll read about it in our email list. But I have to also give myself permission to shift a little bit. I have to give myself permission to like, oh, maybe the new thing right now that's really interesting is AI. I have a friend who is now developing her thought leadership in the AI space, but she didn't come out as the AI thought leader. She kind of just knew that her audience was piqued and their interest was really curious about it. She just started talking about it more. And so, not that her values have changed, she's actually still serving the same audience, but giving yourself permission that your brand expression might shift a little bit as you change and as your audience changes too.
Amazing. Well, if people want to find you, if they want to learn more about your brand coaching, your brand photography, and I know you have a worksheet too that we're linking in the show notes. How can they find you? How can they connect with you online?
On the interwebs, I am all up in there, Kristin. So the interwebs, you can find me at Come Plum, and I like to say come like like you're going somewhere, and plum like the fruit. So comeplum.com, that's us. If you want the free worksheet, we have like a short little URL. It's bit.ly/comeplum brand foundations. But come, the C, the P, the B, and the F are all capitalized. So that will be a link. You can find us on the Instagrams too. We're on there as well at Plum.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on today. Can't wait to chat again soon.
Thanks.
Are you ready to take the leap to start your own business? Well, we created just the guide for you. It's called Pivot. In this e-guide, we equip you with resources and tools to find your marketable skill and how to get your first clients. Here at Complum, we believe in empowering individuals to create careers on their own terms. With Pivot, this e-guide empowers you to live a life that's aligned with your values. Look at the show notes to grab yours.